Benjamin Grant, a 47-year-old CEO known for his brilliant mind and billion-dollar empire in San Francisco. But beneath the polished suits and boardroom victories, Benjamin carries an emptiness he's never dared name. One rainy afternoon, in a quiet cafe near Mission Street, he spots an 11-year-old girl writing poetry. Her words echo his own from decades ago. Her name is Ellie. Something about her, the way she holds the pen, the rhythm in her lines, stops him cold. Curious and unsettled, Benjamin digs deeper and discovers Ellie lives with her grandmother, Ruth. Her mother, Hannah, the woman Benjamin once loved deeply, is dying, and she never told him he had a daughter. As past wounds reopen, Benjamin must face a cruel truth. His own mother, Evelyn, hid Hannah's letters. Now, time is slipping away, and Ellie wants nothing to do with the stranger who suddenly shows up claiming to care. A poem about family becomes their fragile bridge. But just as hope flickers, Evelyn tries to take Ellie through legal manipulation. Will Benjamin choose love over legacy? Can a father's heart heal what pride once broke? This is a story of letters lost, love rediscovered, and the quiet power of poetry to mend what power once destroyed. Subscribe now for this unforgettable journey of truth, trust, and second chances. The steam from Benjamin Grant's cappuccino curled gently toward the skylight above, catching in the early morning haze that filled the cafe like a whispered secret. Outside, the San Francisco fog hung thick over Mission Street, muffling the hum of the city, dulling the world to a soft gray. But inside Quill and Bloom, it was all warmth and quiet chatter, artists sketching, writers typing, and baristas humming over milk frothers. Benjamin sat alone at his usual corner table, leather portfolio beside him, tailored coat draped over the chair. At 47, he was still the man headlines called the silent visionary of Silicon Row, with piercing eyes and a silver-streaked jawline that graced financial magazines. But he hadn't opened his laptop. Not this morning. Not since she walked in. She couldn't have been more than 11. Auburn hair tucked into a lopsided braid. Corduroy jumper. Scuffed Converse. She sat by the window seat with a notebook in her lap, legs curled up beneath her, completely absorbed. Every so often she paused, chewed the end of her pen, and scribbled again. Pages filled quickly. It wasn't just that she was writing. It was how she wrote. Benjamin squinted at the lines when she left her notebook open for a moment. A poem, handwritten, a little shaky maybe, but the language, raw, unfiltered, painfully familiar. I tried to fold the silence into shapes, so it wouldn't feel so sharp. His breath caught. Those exact words. He had written that line, or something nearly identical, when he was 13, alone in his room in Marie, the night his father left. He hadn't shared that poem with anyone. A coincidence, surely. A poetic turn of phrase. But he couldn't unsee it now. As she flipped the page and began writing again, Benjamin leaned forward, heart thudding, watching the rhythm of her pen. The girl didn't glance around like most kids her age. She didn't fidget with a phone or wait for someone. She was rooted. Not lost in the world, but anchored in it, as if her words gave her breath. The barista called his name softly. "Mr. Grant, your second coffee?" He waved her off gently. He was watching the girl. 20 minutes later, she snapped her notebook shut, slung her canvas bag over her shoulder, and walked out the door with her cocoa. Alone. No adult waiting. Benjamin stood instinctively and followed. Not out of impulse. It was something deeper, unexplainable. He trailed her from a distance down Valencia Street, his polished Oxfords clicking against the pavement. She stopped outside a florist, waved at the older woman inside, and ducked into the shop. The window bore a hand-painted sign, Ruth's Florals, since 1974. He turned away quickly, unsure of himself. What was he doing? Following a child because of a few poetic lines? But something gnawed at him. That line. That handwriting. The next morning he returned to the cafe. Same time, same table, waiting. She came again. Same notebook, same window seat. This time, he asked the barista, "The girl by the window, does she come often?" The young woman smiled. "That's Ellie. She's here almost every morning before school. Writes like she's trying to save the world." Ellie, a name now. That night, Benjamin sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Embarcadero, the city lights blinking against the glass. He dug through an old leather box he hadn't touched in years. Old journals, yellowed paper, a cracked fountain pen. And then, tucked into the folds of a long-forgotten envelope, there it was, the original poem. I tried to fold the silence into shapes, so it wouldn't feel so sharp. His own handwriting, thinner then, more hurried, but the same. He stared at the page for a long time. How could this be? A dozen possibilities flared through his mind. A coincidence? A literary echo? A child inspired by a school anthology? Or something else? He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. "Amanda, I need some help. Quiet, discreet." "Yes, sir. What is it?" "There's a girl named Ellie who visits Quill and Bloom Café each morning. I need to know who she is, where she lives, who her parents are." Amanda hesitated. "Sir, is this personal?" Benjamin looked out at the bay, the night as wide and hollow as the past he'd buried. He thought of the girl's face, the way her brow furrowed when she wrote, as if she was fighting something only she could see. He answered softly, "I think it might be." As he set the phone down, the wind whispered against the window pane. The poem still sat open on his desk, a bridge to a past he thought had vanished, a reflection in the fog. And, somewhere across the city, an 11-year-old girl was writing again. The girl's poem still echoed in Benjamin's mind as he stepped out of the black town car and onto the cracked pavement outside Ruth's Florals. Morning light filtered through tangled branches above the Mission District sidewalk, casting flickers of gold and gray across the faded awning. The storefront window displayed a neat arrangement of lilies and gardenias, not flashy, but dignified, like someone had tried to hold beauty together on a modest budget. Amanda's report had arrived the night before. Discreet, thorough. Ellie Wilson, 11 years old, lives with her maternal grandmother, Ruth Wilson. Mother, Hannah Wilson. No current employment records, recent hospital admittance, ongoing treatment for an undisclosed condition. Hannah Wilson. The name alone had stopped him cold. Hannah. The woman who used to read his terrible college poems like they were scripture. The one who taught him how to make chamomile tea without boiling the flowers. The one his mother had called inappropriate, unsuitable, and finally, gone. He stepped inside. A gentle chime above the door announced his arrival. The shop smelled of eucalyptus and something faintly sweet, like jasmine soaked in memory. Behind the counter stood an older woman with sharp cheekbones and tired, intelligent eyes. Her gray hair was swept into a low twist. She looked up from a ledger, adjusting her glasses. "Can I help you?" Her voice was steady, but not unfriendly. Benjamin cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Ruth Wilson." "I'm Ruth," she said cautiously. "And you are—" He stepped forward, loosening the scarf around his neck. "My name is Benjamin Grant. I believe your granddaughter comes to the Quill and Bloom Café most mornings." Her face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Ellie doesn't usually talk to strangers." "I didn't speak to her," he replied gently. "But I saw her writing. A poem. The phrasing. It was almost identical to something I wrote decades ago." Ruth said nothing. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he added. "I'm just trying to understand something that doesn't make sense." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded toward the back room. "Come on," she said quietly. "We shouldn't talk here." The back office was cramped but warm, with a small kettle on a hot plate and faded family photos pinned to a corkboard. Ruth motioned for him to sit across from her at a tiny desk. A newspaper sat folded open to the obituary section. A vase of half-wilted peonies rested beside it. "You said your name was Benjamin Grant?" she asked, settling into the chair with effort. "The tech guy?" He gave a tired smile. "That's what the world calls me, yes. And you think you wrote the same poem as my granddaughter?" "Not think," Benjamin said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out the yellowed page, unfolded it carefully, and slid it across the table. "I wrote this in 1989. I found her version in her notebook. Same line, same rhythm." Ruth read it in silence. When she finished, she folded the paper with care, like something sacred. Then she looked up. "She didn't copy it," Ruth said softly. "She's never read your work. That came from her." Benjamin leaned in, heart racing. "Then how?" Ruth hesitated. She touched the edge of the vase beside her, as if grounding herself. "Because her mother used to read it to her." Benjamin froze. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Hannah," Ruth said slowly, "used to have a box of old letters. Ones you wrote to her, ones she never sent." The words hit him like a blow to the chest. "I never got any letters." Ruth exhaled. "I believe that. But Hannah—" She waited, at first. Then after a while she stopped expecting anything, especially after the baby came. Benjamin's breath caught. "Ellie is—" Ruth gave a single nod. "Yes, your daughter." For a long time, the only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead light. "She never told me," Benjamin said, almost to himself. "I would have—" "She wanted to," Ruth said, her voice firm but not accusing. "But your mother made sure she couldn't. Evelyn came to see us, told Hannah she'd ruin your future. Said if she stayed in contact, she'd make sure you lost everything." He sat back, stunned. Evelyn, his mother, always smiling for the press, always protecting the brand. "I had no idea," he murmured. "I believe you," Ruth said. "But that doesn't change the fact that Ellie's almost 12, and she doesn't know you. And her mother is running out of time." Benjamin looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Ruth hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a medical folder. "Hannah has late-stage lymphoma. She was diagnosed 2 years ago. It's progressed." He felt the world tilt. "She's at St. Joseph's," Ruth added. "We've kept it quiet. Hannah didn't want pity. She just wanted time with Ellie." Benjamin's hands trembled as he gripped the folder. "Can I see her?" "She doesn't know you're here," Ruth said gently. "And this will be a shock, but yes, you should see her." Benjamin stood, heart pounding with 1,000 questions, 1,000 regrets. Ruth walked him to the door. "She still keeps your letters," she said quietly. "Even the ones that came back unopened." He paused. "Why?" She said, "Some words never leave us, even when the people do." Outside, the sky had turned silver, and the street hummed with passing cars and scattered voices. But to Benjamin, the world had narrowed to a single name. Hannah, and a single truth. He had a daughter, and he was already running out of time. The manila folder still weighed heavy in Benjamin's hand as he walked the quiet hospital corridor, the air humming with antiseptic and whispered urgency. His thoughts reeled. Ellie, a daughter he'd never known. Hannah, the love he lost without understanding why. And Evelyn, his mother, at the center of it all. He hadn't spoken to Evelyn in 2 days, not since finding out from Ruth that Hannah had been cut out of his life by someone he trusted most. His mother had claimed to protect his future, but what future was worth missing 11 years of a child's life? He entered the records room in his Nob Hill townhouse later that evening, after hours of sitting in his car outside St. Joseph's, unable to make himself walk through the hospital doors just yet. The room hadn't changed in years. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held everything from legal documents to personal archives. Tidy, controlled, his mother's style. But tucked behind one of the locked drawers, a drawer she rarely let anyone access, Benjamin found them. Letters. At least a dozen, yellowing with time, their edges curled, all in Hannah's handwriting. "Ben, I don't know if this will reach you, but I needed you to know." He sat down hard on the leather reading chair. His hands trembled as he unfolded the pages. One after another they broke him open. Raw, honest accounts of her pregnancy, her fears, the early days of Ellie's life, the nights Ellie had colic, her first laugh, her first poem. Each letter ended the same way. "If you ever want to be in her life, don't wait too long. She's becoming her own person, and she's beautiful, just like you." None of the envelopes had been opened. Not a single one bore his handwriting in return. And, tucked behind the last one, he found the truth. A return to sender notice. Recipient refused delivery. Sender not authorized. Stamped in red. Dated nearly 11 years ago. His mother's address, not his. He gripped the envelope so tightly it nearly tore. She had known. Evelyn had known. And she had made sure he didn't. That night, Benjamin stood in the dim light of his mother's study, the same room where she'd once told him to choose legacy over love. She looked up from her tablet when he entered. "You should have called," she said calmly. "I assumed you were in LA for the FinTech conference." He dropped the stack of letters onto her mahogany desk. The sound echoed like thunder in the silent room. Evelyn's face didn't flinch, but she didn't reach for them either. "You intercepted them," Benjamin said, voice low, shaking. "I protected you," she replied evenly. "That woman would have derailed your entire career. You were a month from landing your first funding round. You had a future. Real influence. You still do. You stole my family," he whispered. "You made decisions that weren't yours to make. She would have held you back. She gave birth to my daughter." The words hung between them, charged, unforgiving. For a moment, Evelyn didn't speak. Then, slowly, she folded her hands. "She's 11. If she mattered that much to Hannah, she would have found another way to reach you." Benjamin's fists clenched. "She did try. You stopped her. And now, Hannah's dying." That cracked something. Evelyn's face faltered, just slightly, but enough. "I didn't know she was sick," she said, softer. Benjamin turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he stopped. "Her name is Ellie," he said, "and she writes poetry. Same cadence I used to use when I was 19. She thinks I'm just another rich guy." He looked back, and thanks to you, I am. The next morning, he stood outside St. Joseph's oncology unit with the envelope still tucked in his coat pocket. The first one Hannah ever sent. The first one he would finally answer. He took a long breath and stepped through the automatic doors. At the nurse's station, he gave Hannah's full name. The nurse's eyes softened. "Room 212, but..." "She's resting. It's been a hard week." "I'll wait," Benjamin said. When he entered the room, he didn't expect what he saw. Hannah lay curled on her side, pale, her once dark curls now tinged with silver. She looked smaller somehow, but the grace was still there, in the way her hand rested lightly on the book by her bedside, in the steady rhythm of her breath. On the windowsill sat a photograph. A little girl, all elbows and curiosity, beaming at the camera. Benjamin stepped closer, his hand shaking as he set the envelope down beside the photograph. And then Hannah stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the morning light. When she saw him, her expression went still. "Ben?" she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. "I thought," she began, voice raspy, "I thought you never got them." He stepped forward. "I didn't. But I have them now, all of them." Silence stretched as her eyes filled. "You came," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." Her lips quirked into a tired smile. "You always were late to things that mattered." He let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. "I'm here now," he said softly. Hannah looked at him for a long time. "Does she know?" "Not yet," Benjamin said, "but I want to. I don't want her hurt. She's already been hurt, and so have you." He reached into his pocket and laid the folded poem Ellie had written, the one from the café, beside the letters. "She's brilliant, Hannah." Hannah's eyes lingered on the paper, then she closed them again. "She's yours," she whispered. Benjamin watched her chest rise and fall with fragile steadiness. Outside, the sky had begun to clear, and in his heart, a vow was forming, quiet, powerful. He would not let them lose each other again. The envelope crinkled softly in Benjamin's hands as he stepped out of Hannah's hospital room. He didn't speak, couldn't. The weight of her whispered words, "She's yours," still echoed in his chest, vibrating through every bone. The hallway felt longer than before, its sterile walls and low lights making him feel smaller than he had in years. This was not a boardroom. There were no charts, no data points, no exit strategy, just truth, undeniable, unforgiving. She was his daughter, Ellie. He had barely begun to grasp what that meant when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Amanda. He hesitated, then answered. "Sir," she said, her voice low but urgent, "I followed up on the records like you asked. I found something." Benjamin leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. "Go on. There's a letter Hannah sent directly to your apartment 5 years ago. It was signed by Evelyn. It never reached you." Benjamin closed his eyes. "Another one." Amanda paused. "And there's more. Your name. It's not on Ellie's birth certificate." He swallowed hard. "Is anyone listed?" "No. It just says father unknown, but we ran the timeline. The hospital records from 2011 match. Hannah was admitted under emergency labor. No visitors were recorded during delivery, and she was discharged the next morning." Alone. Hannah had done it alone. "Thank you," he whispered. After the call, he drove through the winding hills to the storage unit Evelyn had insisted he never touch without her. He hadn't questioned it before, not until now. The lock clicked open with a shiver of metal and memory. The space was immaculate, of course, rows of boxes, labeled in Evelyn's crisp handwriting. He wasn't looking for more documents. He was looking for a truth his mother had buried. In the back corner, under an old garment bag, he found it. A keepsake box. Floral, faded, familiar. Hannah's. He recognized it instantly. She had kept it on her desk when they were together, a box for letters I'm too scared to send, she used to joke. He opened it. Inside were photos. Some of her alone, some holding a newborn baby. A hospital bracelet marked E. Sloan. And then, taped gently to the lid, was a note in Hannah's looping script. "If Benjamin ever finds this, please tell him the truth. I tried. I really did. But love shouldn't have to fight this hard to be seen." Benjamin sat down on the concrete floor, the photos scattered in his lap like memories he never got to make. One in particular froze him. Ellie, maybe 5 years old, grinning beside a birthday cake with uneven letters that read, "To my little poet." That crooked smile. Those eyes. His. When he returned home that night, he didn't sleep. He couldn't. Instead, he pulled the letters from the hospital room, the ones Hannah had written but never sent, and laid them across his dining table. One by one, he reread them, each line a mirror, each page a quiet plea. And when he reached the last one, dated just after Ellie's 6th birthday, he found what he hadn't dared to hope for. I told her stories about you, not the headlines, the man I knew before all that, the one who used to write poems in the margins of newspapers, the one who brought me almond croissants because I said they tasted like childhood. She doesn't know you're her father, not yet, but she writes, Ben. She writes the way you did when your heart was too full for words. He pressed the letter to his chest. This wasn't a coincidence. It was legacy. It was Ellie. The next morning, he stood in front of Ruth's flower shop just as the city began to stir. The air smelled of damp pavement and chrysanthemums. He held the keepsake box in one hand, his nerves in the other. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. Ruth looked up from the counter. Her gray hair was pinned back with a silk clip, and her hands were dusted with pollen and purpose. She didn't look surprised. I was wondering when you'd come, she said quietly. Benjamin nodded, his voice stuck somewhere behind the lump in his throat. She's yours, Ruth added, confirming what Hannah already had. We kept your name from her because we didn't think we'd ever see you again. Hannah didn't want Ellie growing up hoping for something that wouldn't come. I understand, he said. I do, and I'm not here to disrupt her life, but I want to know her, not as a project, not as some obligation, as a father. Ruth studied him for a long moment. Do you know what she asked me the other day? She said softly. She asked if poetry can help people find the parts of themselves they lost. Benjamin's breath caught. She's looking for something, Ruth said, and I think you might be part of the answer. He placed the box on the counter gently. She deserves to know where her words come from. As Ruth opened the lid and glanced at the photos, her eyes shimmered. She closed it slowly and placed a hand over the top. Come back tomorrow, she said. She'll be here after school, but I won't tell her who you are. That has to come from you. Benjamin nodded, his chest heavy with gratitude and fear. Thank you, he whispered. Outside, the wind stirred the petals on the sidewalk. He looked down at a single daisy caught in the grate near the curb. Small, resilient, much like the girl who had unknowingly written him back into his own story. The next afternoon, the air in San Francisco felt a little warmer than usual, the kind of late-day sun that dipped golden through city skylights and cast long shadows on the sidewalk. Benjamin stood across the street from Ruth's flower shop, watching through the window as Ellie walked in, her backpack loose on one shoulder, a sketchbook in her arms. He inhaled slowly. This was it. She looked tired, but peaceful, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, earbuds still dangling around her neck. She said something to Ruth, then dropped into the worn blue chair by the window, opened her sketchbook, and pulled a pencil from behind her ear. He recognized that look, concentration mixed with curiosity. It was the same look he used to have when writing poems in high school, back when words were more real to him than profit margins. With his heart thudding in his chest, Benjamin crossed the street and gently opened the shop door. The bell overhead jingled, and Ruth looked up quickly. She gave a soft nod, but said nothing. Ellie didn't notice him at first. Then she did. Her eyes darted to the doorway, then back to her page. She stiffened slightly but didn't speak. He stepped in carefully, not wanting to startle her. Hi, he said, keeping his voice low and warm. Ellie glanced up again, guarded. Hi, she replied slowly. I'm Ben. He paused. I saw you writing the other day at the café. Ellie tilted her head. So? "I liked your words," he said, trying not to overstep. "They reminded me of how I used to write when I was younger." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you a poet?" "Used to be," he said, smiling gently. "I write business memos now. Less inspiring." Ellie didn't laugh, but her mouth curved for a second, then flattened again. She closed her notebook slightly. "Why are you here?" Benjamin hesitated. "I wanted to talk to you. I know this might feel strange, but I wanted to get to know you." She looked directly at him then. "Why? You don't even know me." His breath caught. "I know that you're smart, that you write from your gut, that your words carry weight." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you one of those people who just picks a kid and decides to sponsor them or something? My school did that once." "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she asked, blunt and brave, like someone used to cutting through adult noise. Benjamin stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "I've made mistakes, Ellie. Big ones. I didn't know about you. Not for a long time, but I'm trying to understand the truth now." Her expression didn't shift. "Why do rich people always show up when they want to feel better about something?" He winced. "That's fair," he said softly. "I guess people like me do that. But I'm not here to drop off a donation. I'm here because—" He stopped himself. She was studying him now, her arms crossed, waiting for whatever adult thing he was going to say next. "Can I buy you a hot chocolate?" he asked instead. She blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously," he said, smiling. "No strings attached." "From where?" "There's a spot down the block. Has marshmallows." Ellie turned toward Ruth, who nodded gently from behind the counter. Ellie shrugged and stood. "Okay, but I'm not giving you any of my whipped cream." "Deal," he said, and for the first time she smirked. They walked together in silence, not awkward, but unsure. She kept a careful pace beside him, never too close, never too far. At the café, she ordered confidently. Marshmallows, extra cinnamon, no whipped cream. He ordered plain coffee. They sat near the window. Benjamin studied her face. Her features were so clearly Hannah's, but in the curve of her chin, in the way she tapped her pencil while waiting, he saw himself too. "Do you ever write about people you don't understand yet?" he asked. Ellie took a sip, licking foam from her lip. "All the time. Why?" She looked at him with a seriousness that made her feel older than 11. "Because writing's how I figure things out. If I can make it into a poem, I don't have to be scared of it." His throat tightened. "That's beautiful," he whispered. She shrugged. "It's just what I do." After a pause, he said, "I'd like to read one sometime, if that's okay." She didn't answer right away. Then, "Maybe, if you're still around?" Benjamin's gaze softened. "I will be." She looked down into her drink, swirling the marshmallows with her straw. "A lot of people say that. I won't say it unless I mean it." She nodded slowly. Then, with quiet defiance, she pulled out a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket and slid it across the table. A poem, scribbled in pencil, the title at the top, "Invisible Threads." He didn't read it yet. He held it gently, like something sacred. "Thank you," he said, voice husky. She looked at him and said, "Don't lose it. I only wrote one copy." Benjamin smiled, carefully tucking the page into his jacket. He didn't know how to explain what he felt. Awe, regret, hope. It was too much to say. So he simply said, "I won't lose it, I promise." She nodded again, then looked out of the window. And, for the first time, Benjamin let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of a chance. It was the beginning. The poem Ellie had given him, "Invisible Threads," was still folded carefully in Benjamin's inner jacket pocket when he stepped into Hannah's hospital room later that night. It was quiet now. The window blinds were half drawn, catching the orange-pink glow of the setting sun, casting soft bands of light across the pale walls. Hannah was awake. She looked weaker than the last time he'd seen her, a little smaller, as if the hospital bed had slowly pulled her into itself. But her eyes still held the sharpness he remembered, and her voice, though quiet, carried strength. "You came back," she murmured, her eyes flicking to the doorway, then to his face. "I told you I would," Benjamin replied gently, setting a brown paper bag on the small table near her bed. "You still like almond croissants?" A faint smile touched her lips. "You remembered." "I remember everything," he said, "or at least the parts I should have fought harder not to forget." Hannah didn't answer right away. She looked past him toward the window, her fingers slowly tracing the edge of her blanket. "I've been writing a letter," she said softly. Benjamin sat beside her. "To me?" "No, to Ellie." Her voice wavered just a little. "For when I'm gone." He flinched. "Don't say that." She turned to look at him. "Ben, we both know where this is going. I've made peace with it. I just haven't figured out how to explain why she never knew about you until now." Benjamin lowered his head. "I blamed you," she continued, "for years. I thought you disappeared. I thought I wasn't enough for you to stay." "I would have stayed," he said quickly, almost desperately. "I would have dropped everything. If I had known." "I know," she whispered. "Now I do. But the damage was already done. And Evelyn made sure I couldn't reach you." Benjamin's jaw clenched. "I found the letters, the ones you sent, and I found your keepsake box in my mother's storage unit. She took everything, Hannah. She made sure I never saw you again." Hannah looked down at her hands. "I wondered. Part of me still hoped you just chose not to write back, because then at least I could be angry. Anger's easier than heartbreak." He reached into his coat and gently pulled out the poem Ellie had given him. "She writes like you," he said. "She thinks in metaphors and speaks in colors, and she sees through people like she's been here longer than 11 years. Hannah smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "She's always been like that. When she was little, she'd make up stories about where the birds went at night or why shadows followed you, but never led." "She's brilliant," Benjamin said, voice thick. "She deserves to know where she comes from, and I want her to know me." Hannah's face darkened slightly. "You don't get to just show up with croissants and make that happen." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to pretend none of this happened. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." Her eyes searched his face. "Why now?" He didn't look away. "Because I thought success would fill the ache," he said quietly. "And it didn't. Because for years I couldn't name what I'd lost. And then I saw her, sitting in that cafe, scribbling into her notebook, and everything I'd buried came back." She closed her eyes. "I wanted to hate you," she said. "When you didn't show up for the birth, when she got pneumonia and we couldn't afford the ER, when she cried the first time a kid asked where her dad was." Benjamin swallowed hard. "I hate that you had to go through that alone." There was a long silence. Finally, Hannah opened her eyes and reached for his hand. Her fingers were thinner now, fragile, but they closed over his with a kind of familiarity that broke him. "I don't know what you'll be to her yet," she said, "but I'm not going to stand in the way." A tear slipped down his cheek. "Thank you. But don't lie to her," Hannah added, her voice firmer now. "Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to be perfect. She'll see through it anyway. Just be real." "I can do that." She released his hand and turned toward the window. "Tell me something real, then." Benjamin hesitated, then said, "I still keep a copy of that poem you wrote about the ocean, the one you never published." She looked back at him, surprised. "I thought you hated that one." "I didn't understand it then," he said. "Now I do." Her smile returned, softer this time. "You've changed." "I'm still changing," The monitor beside her beeped steadily. The moment stretched. "Will you tell her?" Hannah asked. "I'd like to," he said. "With you there, if you're up for it." "I'll try," she whispered. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "She gave me a poem," he said. "It's called Invisible Threads. I think she wrote it about you, and about me, without knowing." Hannah's eyes shimmered. She's good at that, writing what the heart knows before the mind catches up. He nodded. "And what does your heart know, Ben?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He looked back. "That I never stopped loving you," he said. And with that, he stepped out into the hall, carrying a poem in his pocket and the weight of time in his chest. The memory of Hannah's trembling voice still echoed in Benjamin's mind as his elevator doors slid open to the top floor of Grant Industries. The city skyline stretched wide behind the glass walls of his office, powerful, untouchable, but for the first time, Benjamin felt none of it belonged to him. He stepped inside and closed the door quietly. On his desk sat a small paper Ellie had left him 2 days ago, a doodle of a tree with its roots shaped like cursive letters. At the bottom she'd scrawled, "Not all things grow upward. Some grow inward." He traced the edge of the page with his thumb. Then his office door opened. "Benjamin," Evelyn said, stepping in without knocking. Her heels echoed sharply on the hardwood. "We need to talk." He didn't turn around. She shut the door behind her with that precise, deliberate grace she'd always carried, not unlike a queen sealing an edict. "You've been avoiding me," she said coolly. "I've been busy," he replied, keeping his gaze on the skyline. "Busy digging up graves?" He turned then, slowly, no. "Just the truth you buried in one." She raised her chin. "That girl is not your responsibility." "She's my daughter," he said evenly. "You made sure I didn't know it, but that doesn't make it less true." Evelyn crossed her arms. "What's your plan, Benjamin? Bring her into this world of cameras and contracts and paparazzi? You think that's what a child needs?" "No," he said. "She needs love, honesty. She needs a father who shows up." Evelyn's jaw tensed. "And you think you can be that man overnight? You're too soft for this." He almost laughed. "You mean I care?" "No," she snapped. "I mean, you hesitate. You act from guilt. That makes you weak and dangerous, especially now." He stared at her, stunned. "You're calling love a liability?" "I'm calling sentiment a crack in the armor." He stepped closer. "Is that why you kept Hannah's letters from me? Because love didn't fit your blueprint?" "She was beneath you," Evelyn said, without flinching. "You had the chance to become something rare, and I wasn't going to let you ruin that for a girl with nothing." Benjamin's voice dropped. "She gave me everything, and you took it." Silence pulsed between them. Then Evelyn pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on his desk. "What's that?" he asked. "Guardianship petition," she said. "Filed this morning. I've requested temporary custody of Ellie under emergency concern. Emotional instability. Financial uncertainty. You've never been a parent, Benjamin." He stared at the folder. "You went behind my back." "I protected you once," she said softly. "Now I'm protecting her." He picked up the folder slowly, his hands calm but trembling slightly at the edges. "You're going to drag this into court?" he asked. "Take a dying woman's child from her?" Evelyn didn't blink. "It's what's best for the child. You'll thank me later." He looked down at the folder, at the elegant signature of his own mother, sealing the betrayal. Then he looked up. "I won't let you do this." "You don't have a say," she said, almost with pity, "unless you're prepared to prove you're a fit parent." Benjamin moved to the window, heart pounding, breath tightening in his chest. Ellie's drawing was still there on the desk. She had trusted him with something small, something beautiful. He couldn't lose her. He turned back to Evelyn. "Then I'll fight." She smiled faintly. "You'll lose." No, he said, voice steady, because this time, I'm not fighting for power or pride. I'm fighting for a child who's never had a father show up, and I will not let her down. Evelyn stepped toward the door. Then be ready. The world doesn't hand second chances, Benjamin, especially not to men like you. When she left, he sank into his chair, staring at the petition. Then, slowly, he opened his laptop. He pulled up the acquisition contract he'd been working on for months, the one deal that could raise his company's valuation by 30% overnight. He stared at the figures, then closed it. He called his legal team. "Cancel the deal," he said quietly. "All of it." "Sir?" his assistant stammered. "But cancel it. I'll explain later." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. He had spent his entire life chasing legacy. Now he understood that legacy wasn't built in glass towers or billion-dollar mergers. It was written in poems folded in coat pockets. It was held in the hand of an 11-year-old girl who still didn't know the whole truth, but soon would, and he would be there, every step of the way. The echo of Evelyn's words haunted Benjamin well into the night. You'll lose. The world doesn't hand second chances. He sat alone at his kitchen counter, the city outside his penthouse humming with life. But his heart was somewhere else, in a modest hospital room, in a flower shop, in the hands of a girl who didn't yet know if he was staying for good. He had canceled the biggest deal of his career hours earlier. His board would revolt. His shareholders would scream. But Benjamin had made peace with that. Because some battles weren't about balance sheets. They were about soul. The next morning, he stood outside the courthouse with Ruth beside him. She wore a gray shawl draped over her shoulders, her lips pressed in quiet worry. Benjamin wore no tie. He wanted to show up not as CEO of Grant Industries, but as Ellie's father. "She doesn't know you're doing this, does she?" Ruth asked gently. Benjamin shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to protect her from the legal mess. From all of it. She's smart. She'll figure it out soon." "I know," he said softly. "And when she does, I want her to know I fought for her." Inside, the courtroom was smaller than he expected. No marble pillars or flashing lights. Just wood, worn chairs, and a judge who looked like she'd seen too many broken families to count. Evelyn was already there. She sat calmly across the aisle, dressed in a pristine navy suit, a leather folio in her lap. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering strategy, but Evelyn's eyes never left Benjamin. He felt the challenge in her stare. Cold, steady, certain. The judge called the room to order. "Ms. Evelyn Grant," she began, "you are petitioning for emergency guardianship of one Ellie Sloan, age 11, citing emotional instability and lack of legal paternity documentation from the child's biological father. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Evelyn replied smoothly. "And you, Mr. Grant, are contesting the petition?" "I am," Benjamin said. "I'm here as her father." "Are you listed on the birth certificate?" "No," he admitted, lifting his chin. "But I have DNA confirmation, and I have testimony from the child's mother and maternal grandmother confirming paternity." "And the mother is terminally ill," Benjamin said softly. "She's asked me to be part of Ellie's life. She's asked me to be her father." The judge nodded. "What is the nature of your relationship with the child at present?" "I've only recently met her," he admitted. "But we've begun building a connection. She's cautious, and rightly so. She's been hurt. But I'm not here for charity. I'm here because I've missed 11 years I can never get back, and I don't intend to miss one more." Evelyn's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Grant has a well-documented history of prioritizing business above all else. He canceled a 9-figure merger just yesterday. We argue that this is not evidence of emotional growth, but instability. and that this sudden paternal claim is reactive, not reliable. Benjamin stood again. I canceled that deal because I realized profit without purpose is empty. I've built empires, yes, but they've meant nothing compared to a single hour spent with my daughter. He paused, then added, Your Honor, my mother is using this courtroom to fix a story she broke years ago. She intercepted letters. She erased Hannah from my life, and she did it without my knowledge. He reached into his coat and pulled out one of the letters Hannah had written. The first, dated 11 years ago. He handed it to the judge. She kept these from me. I didn't abandon my daughter. I was kept from her. The judge read in silence. The room was still. Evelyn sat frozen. For the first time, her face flickered. The judge looked up. We'll recess for deliberation. A final decision will be delivered tomorrow morning. Outside the courthouse, Ruth touched Benjamin's arm. No matter how this goes, you did the right thing. I hope Ellie sees that one day, he whispered. That night, he returned to the hospital. Hannah was awake, propped up with pillows, her hair tucked in a scarf. She looked exhausted, but when she saw him, she smiled weakly. How did it go? She asked. He sat beside her, taking her hand. I told the truth, he said. Everything, even the parts that hurt. Good, she murmured. She deserves truth. I canceled the merger. Hannah blinked. Ben, I couldn't go into court talking about love while profiting off detachment. I had to show them, and her, what mattered. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. She wrote another poem today, Hannah whispered, left it in her journal. He reached for it, reading the top line aloud. Family is the shape that keeps shifting, but never disappears. He closed his eyes. She's already giving me more than I can give her, he said. No, Hannah whispered. You gave her a chance to believe again. The next morning, Benjamin stood outside the courthouse once more. Heart racing, breath shallow, the judge entered, expression unreadable. After careful review, she began, the court finds no sufficient evidence of harm or instability on Mr. Grant's part. Guardianship petition is denied. Evelyn exhaled sharply, but the judge wasn't finished. In fact, the court recommends expedited legal process to formalize Mr. Grant's parental rights, given biological confirmation and support from the mother and grandmother. Benjamin froze. Then a smile broke through, quiet, disbelieving, and full of awe. He had won. Not power, not property, but something sacred. He walked out into the morning light, feeling the world shift beneath his feet. Now came the harder part, proving to a cautious little poet that he wasn't going anywhere. Benjamin stood in the doorway of Ruth's flower shop, unsure of whether to knock or step inside. The late afternoon sun filtered through the glass windows, casting golden streaks across the wood floors. Inside, Ellie sat at the same blue chair by the window, legs tucked beneath her, a pencil in one hand, her notebook in the other. She hadn't noticed him yet. He hesitated. The courtroom win still felt fragile, paper thin. Legal validation meant little if the girl who mattered most didn't believe in it. He cleared his throat gently. Ellie looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "Hey," Benjamin said softly, holding her gaze. "Hey," she replied. Her pencil hovered over the page but didn't move. "Can I come in?" She gave a small shrug. "It's a public shop." He stepped inside and walked slowly toward her. Ruth glanced up from behind the counter, gave a quiet nod, then turned back to a tray of tulips. Benjamin crouched beside the chair, careful to give Ellie space. "I went to court today," he began. She looked at him directly. "I know." "You do?" She nodded. "Grandma Ruth told me. Said you were fighting for me." Benjamin exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing a little. I didn't want you to get pulled into the mess, but I needed you to know I'm not leaving. Ellie set her pencil down and pulled something from the back of her notebook. A folded page. She handed it to him without a word. He opened it carefully. It was a poem. Title: Home, Maybe. He showed up with tired eyes and a hopeful heart, asked for a seat in a story already written. I said, "Pages tear easily." He said, "Then let's write in pencil." I didn't answer, but I didn't turn the page either. Benjamin read it twice. Then again, he looked up, throat tight. "Ellie?" She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "I don't know if you're staying forever, but I wanted you to know I noticed, that you showed up." "I'll keep showing up," he said gently, "even when it's hard, especially then." There was a long pause. Then Ellie said, "You want to walk with me?" He blinked. "Where?" "To the hospital," she said. "I want to read something to Mom, and maybe you could come too." He nodded, voice quiet. "I'd be honored." They walked together in silence for a few blocks. Not awkward this time. Just quiet, in rhythm. The sidewalk buzzed with people, cars, the scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby cart. But, in that moment, it all faded. Inside the hospital, they stopped by the vending machines. Ellie pulled out 2 quarters and bought a pack of gum. She offered him a piece. He smiled. "I haven't chewed gum in years." She shrugged. "It helps when I'm nervous." They walked the last stretch to Hannah's room. Hannah was awake, propped up with a new scarf around her head and a soft smile on her lips when she saw them. "You two look like you're coming from a poetry duel," she teased. Ellie grinned. "I brought something to read." Benjamin stood back as Ellie opened her notebook and sat at the edge of the bed. "This one's called What I Didn't Know." Her voice was steady but soft. "I didn't know fathers had hands that could fold up poems without creasing the corners. I didn't know silence could sound like love if you listened long enough. I didn't know the word again could mean a beginning, not a repeat." When she finished, Hannah's eyes were wet. Benjamin couldn't breathe. "That's beautiful," Hannah whispered. "Absolutely beautiful." Ellie looked at Benjamin. "You can sit next to her, if you want." He hesitated only a second before moving closer, taking the empty chair by Hannah's side. She reached for his hand. Their fingers interlaced. No tension, just warmth. Ellie watched them for a moment, then smiled. "I think I'm okay if we start a new chapter," she said. Benjamin looked at her, then Hannah. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The poem said everything. And in that quiet hospital room with IVs humming and shadows lengthening on the wall, a family was beginning again. Slowly, carefully, but surely. The hospital room still held the echo of Ellie's poem, even hours after she and Benjamin had left. Hannah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her blanket, as if trying to hold on to something that might float away if she didn't. She'd said nothing then. No big speech, no emotional collapse, just a faint, tired smile and a whisper, "You two look good together." But it lingered in Benjamin's chest longer than any verdict or courtroom win. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it wasn't rejection either. It was permission. A door unlocked. Now, as he walked up the steps of Ruth's flower shop the next morning, his heart raced with quiet hope. In his hand he carried a single white peony, Hannah's favorite, not store-bought. He'd picked it himself, from the rooftop garden of a non-profit he'd once donated to and never visited again. This time, it mattered. Inside the shop, Ellie was restocking greeting cards near the register. Ruth looked up from pruning a bouquet and gave him a small, knowing smile. "She's upstairs," Ruth said simply, nodding toward the back staircase. "Thanks," Benjamin replied. Ellie paused, holding a card in her hand. Is that for her? He held up the flower. Ellie looked at it for a second, then gave a tiny nod. She'll like it. Just don't say too much. She gets overwhelmed. Benjamin chuckled softly. Got it. He climbed the narrow wooden stairs to the loft above the shop. It was small. A bed, a reading chair, and sunlight filtering through lace curtains. Hannah sat by the window, sketching in a journal. She turned when she heard him. Her expression was calm, maybe even curious. He stepped in, holding the flower out without saying a word. She looked at it, surprised, then gently took it from his hand. I didn't think you'd remember, she said quietly. I remembered everything, Hannah, Benjamin said. I just didn't know what had been taken from me. She looked down at the bloom, brushing her finger along its edge. So, what happens now? I was going to ask you the same thing. She set the journal aside and faced him fully. Her voice was soft but steady. Ellie's letting you in, slowly. She writes about you, you know, not directly, but you show up, as a tree, a shadow, a warm coat. Benjamin swallowed. I don't deserve that. No, she agreed, without bitterness, but you're earning it. He sat in the chair across from her, the flower resting in a vase between them now. I know things won't go back to how they were, he said gently. I'm not expecting a fairy tale, but I'm here, for Ellie, for you, if you'll let me, even if all we ever share again is co-parenting poems and awkward hospital visits. A faint smile crossed her lips. That might be the most romantic sentence I've heard in years. I mean it, he said, leaning forward. No pressure, no expectation, just truth. You once said I didn't know how to stay. I want to rewrite that part of the story. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she whispered, Okay. Okay? He repeated, uncertain. You can be her father, Hannah said, voice steady now. Legally, emotionally, every way that matters. Benjamin exhaled, emotion flooding his chest. Thank you, Hannah. But we keep this slow, she added. No grand gestures, no moving in, no sweeping us into your world. I don't want to sweep, he said. I want to build. They sat in silence for a while, watching the dust float in the golden light. Then Hannah said, Ellie's been asking about the letters, the ones I wrote. He nodded. I was going to show her, when you're ready. She deserves to know the whole story, Hannah said, even the parts that hurt. She's brave, he said softly. She already knows how to turn pain into poetry. Hannah smiled again, that quiet, tired strength behind her eyes. She gets that from you. Later that afternoon, as Benjamin stepped outside, Ellie was waiting on the porch, notebook in hand. Did she say yes? She asked. He crouched beside her. She said yes to letting me be your dad, and she said yes to going slow. Ellie looked down at her notebook. I wrote something. Want to hear? Always. She cleared her throat, then read, Some doors open with keys, others open with time, but the best ones? They open when someone stays outside long enough to be let in. Benjamin blinked back tears. That's beautiful. Ellie looked up. It's ours. The next morning, Benjamin sat at his kitchen table, staring at the stack of old envelopes in front of him. The edges were yellowed, but Hannah's handwriting was still graceful, still sure. He ran his thumb over the top letter and exhaled. They weren't just letters, they were proof of love lost, of truth denied, of the years Evelyn had stolen, not just from him, but from Hannah, from Ellie. He picked up his phone and dialed. Good morning, Mr. Grant, said Elaine, his longtime executive assistant. I need you to schedule a private board meeting for this afternoon, and contact the legal team. There's something we need to bring to light. There was a pause. This about Evelyn? Yes. Another pause. Then Elaine simply said, I'll handle it. Benjamin hung up, then carefully slid the letters into a protective folder. He wasn't shaking. Not anymore. Not like when he first found them tucked behind Evelyn's bookshelf, sealed but never sent. He'd read them all, every aching word Hannah had written. And today they would speak. By 3 o'clock, the boardroom at Grant Enterprises was packed. Sleek suits, manicured reputations, and controlled smiles filled the room. Evelyn sat at the head of the table as poised as ever. Her signature navy blazer was pristine, her pearl necklace gleamed. Benjamin entered late, deliberately. He walked past her without a glance and stood at the opposite end. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice calm. "I'll get straight to the point. This is not a financial briefing. This is about integrity and deception." A murmur swept the room. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Benjamin, if this is personal—" "It's not just personal," he cut in, locking eyes with her. "It's professional. And moral." He opened the folder and held up the first letter. "This was written by Hannah Whitmore over 11 years ago. Sent to me. Never received." He laid it on the table. "She wrote dozens, trying to tell me she was pregnant, trying to explain. But they were all intercepted, returned, silenced." Evelyn's expression cracked, just slightly. One board member asked, "Intercepted by whom?" Benjamin looked straight at her. "By my mother, the chairwoman of this company." The room fell silent. Benjamin reached for a second letter, one where Hannah had begged him to come back, saying their daughter deserved to know the truth. "She lied to me," Benjamin said, his voice tightening. "She manipulated legal processes to keep Ellie from me, and she would have continued if not for a chance encounter in a coffee shop." Another board member whispered, "Ellie? The girl in the custody story?" Benjamin nodded. "She's my daughter, and I intend to be her father, with or without this company's approval." Evelyn finally spoke, her voice sharp. "You're destroying your legacy over sentiment." Benjamin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, I'm saving it." He slid the last letter across the table, one with Hannah's hospital signature, postmarked the year Ellie was born. It was dated just 1 week after Evelyn had claimed Hannah had vanished. "Read it," he said to the room. "Then decide who you trust to lead this company into the future." The board was silent. Some read. Others stared at Evelyn. And she, for once, had nothing to say. Later that evening, Benjamin sat on the back porch of Ruth's house, watching Ellie chase fireflies across the tiny garden. Hannah came out with 2 mugs of tea, handing him one as she sat beside him. "How did it go?" she asked. He hesitated. "Quiet," which, in that room, means seismic. She looked at him. "I told the truth," he said, "about everything. The board knows. Legal knows. Evelyn, she can't touch this anymore." Hannah exhaled. "I didn't write those letters expecting anything. I just didn't want to feel erased." Benjamin looked at her, his gaze soft. "You weren't erased. You were rewritten, but now we're reclaiming the story." They sipped in silence for a while, listening to Ellie's laughter blend with the soft hum of city life. Then Hannah spoke, barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing us, even when it cost you." Benjamin reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper, the first poem Ellie had ever written him. "I didn't choose," he said. "I finally stopped running." The porch light flickered. Hannah leaned into the warmth of his shoulder. And, somewhere in the garden, Ellie's voice rang out, "Do you think we could start a poetry club at the flower shop? Like, for real?" Benjamin smiled. "That sounds like the best idea I've heard all year." The soft chime above the door jingled as Benjamin stepped inside. The flower shop smelled of lavender and paper, a curious combination, but one that now meant home. Hannah was arranging sunflowers in the front window, her eyes still tired from treatment but shining in a way he hadn't seen in years. Ellie was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her, colored pencils scattered around her sketch pad. She looked up and grinned. "You're late, Dad." Benjamin chuckled and ruffled her hair. "Blame traffic and 2 interns who can't figure out how to format a proposal." Hannah glanced over her shoulder. "And yet, you're here, with coffee." He held up 2 cups like trophies. "Double shot for the poet-in-chief and chamomile for the queen of sunflowers." Ellie reached for hers, pausing as she looked at the cup's side. Her name was spelled correctly this time. A tiny smile flickered on her lips. Outside, a few neighbors passed by the sidewalk chalkboard that read, "Open Mic Poetry, Saturday. Theme, Family." Below it, Ellie's neat handwriting had added, "All ages welcome. No rhymes required." It had been her idea, the poetry club, not just at school, but here, at the shop where Hannah once worked part-time, where Benjamin now helped fund community workshops. The back room, once stacked with boxes and brittle wreaths, had been transformed with mismatched chairs, twinkle lights, and a tiny stage. They called it the sunroom. It had started with 6 kids from the neighborhood. Now, 30 people had signed up. Benjamin stepped behind the counter, organizing some flyers for the next event. One had Ellie's poem printed on it, the one she had given him weeks ago, about what family really meant. A family is a heart with more than one beat, a place where silence still feels sweet. He never read it without feeling something stir inside. As he taped the flyer to the register, Hannah joined him. She slid beside him silently, handing him a small envelope with Benjamin's name written in her elegant script. "What's this?" he asked. "Something I wrote a long time ago," she replied. "Back when I thought I'd never see you again. I found it in a drawer last week and couldn't bring myself to throw it away." He looked at her. Not just the sadness behind her eyes, but the quiet strength, too. He opened the envelope and unfolded the paper, a single page, a single sentence. "Even if you never read this, I want you to know you were worth writing to." Benjamin's throat tightened. He folded the letter again, carefully, reverently. "I was the one who didn't know how to listen. But I'm listening now." She nodded, slowly. "And I'm learning how to trust." Ellie poked her head from around the corner. "Hey, can I read you guys something?" They both turned. "Always," Hannah said. Ellie held up a new poem, still scribbled in pencil, eraser marks everywhere. She stood in the middle of the store like it was a grand theater. "It's called The Garden We Grew." Her voice was soft at first, but steady. "We were seeds, scattered in wind, some held by silence, some by sin. But someone watered, someone stayed, and now we bloom in sun and shade." When she finished, there was no applause, just the kind of silence that filled a room with more meaning than clapping ever could. Benjamin wiped the corner of his eye and whispered, "She's got your heart." Hannah shook her head. "She's got both of ours." Later that evening, as twilight bathed the streets of San Francisco in gold, the shop lights stayed on longer than usual. A boy from the neighborhood stopped by to pin his own poem on the community wall. A grandmother left a vase of lilies for the next event. And, in the back room, Ellie was showing 2 younger kids how to rhyme without rhyming. Benjamin stood near the doorway, arms crossed, watching it all. He had once measured success by quarterly gains, flawless presentations, and pristine control. But tonight, in this cozy, imperfect little shop, surrounded by laughter, wild metaphors, and poems scribbled on napkins, he saw a different kind of empire. One built not on power, but on presence. He glanced at Hannah, then Ellie, A new chapter had begun, and this one they'd write together, the end.